right.
Hello, science enthusiasts! Welcome to Spaces Unleashed. Every week, we invite an amazing expert to share their area of knowledge with us. After a short interview, we'll open up the floor to questions. Our guest today is the professional Martian Planet Lab person. I'm not sure what your title is at Planet Lab. Dr. Tanya Harrison. How are you doing today, Doctor?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. You were on the road, you said. You're at some big conference in Texas. South by South something? I don't know. I've never been. What is it? It looks cool.
Yeah, it's I don't even know how to describe it. South by Southwest, I think, started as like an arts and music festival, and then over the years has just exploded into a whole bunch of different areas. And so now they cover science and tech and just all sorts of things. And so the last few days we were participating in the space track of stuff at South by, which is kind of a new addition to the conference. So I'm really glad to see that they are gaining a new appreciation for space.
Nice. And on Sunday, were you at a booth with Dr. Jesse Christensen and another fellow I don't recognize? Were you at a booth with Dr. Christensen?
Yeah, so we were there supporting Unistellar, which is a company that makes smart telescopes. They're really, really cool. If you aren't familiar with them, check them out. It's a telescope that you can use even if you have absolutely no knowledge of the sky or telescopes or any of that kind of stuff. It sets up in like 5 minutes. You open up an app on your phone, shows you whatever's visible to you, like in that moment, wherever you are, and you can just drive around the sky. It's so cool.
That is amazing. I just think it's cool that did you were you at a booth physically with Dr. Christensen? Because she was a guest on the podcast and on Spaces as well. I just thought that was kind of cool. The two of you were in the same location.
Oh, nice. Yeah, we were on a panel together talking about citizen science, and then we were both at the booth at the same time, along with Tim Rust, who played Tuvok on Star Trek Voyager. So that was a fangirl moment for me, since I grew up watching a lot of Star Trek as a kid. I saw him the day before we went to the panel. We were rehearsing and we got drinks and stuff, and I was just losing my mind. I was like, I just have to say, I grew up watching Voyager. Tuvok was my dad's favorite character. Like, can I please take a picture with you? And then we got to hang out for like the whole evening. It was amazing.
Oh my goodness. You know, that reminds me of when I met Gillian Anderson at a Comic-Con, who was Dr. Dana Scully from the X-Files.
Nice.
She was the reason I went into science. and I had this whole speech I was going to tell her, but instead I just said, I had a big crush on you when I was in high school. And then that was so awkward and terrible. So anyways, but more about you, Doc. I introduced you as Dr. Harrison. What's your education background?
So it's been a bit of a journey. My PhD is in geology with a specialization in planetary science and exploration, a very long title. Basically just means geology, but on Mars in my case. And then I did a master's degree in earth and environmental sciences, which was still focused on Mars. So the name is a slight misnomer. And then my undergrad, I did a double major in astronomy and physics because I thought, well, planets are in space. I should be an astronomer. And I didn't find out until later that if I wanted to study Mars, I actually should have been a geologist. So made a little bit of a pivot there.
Oh my goodness. You're like Mark Watney.
Well, he's a botanist.
He's a botanist. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I got that screwed up. I'm sorry. Yeah. But he was, okay. I got that screwed up. He was collecting rocks at the front. Anyways, what got you into science and space? Like, was there a moment when you were young, you just looked up at the sky and you're like, that's for me? Or I guess I'm curious.
So it's going to sound funny because it's the initial spark is not anything that sounds like it's related to space at all. It was a movie called Big Bird in Japan, which came out in 89 or 90, something like that. And Big Bird from Sesame Street goes to Japan and he ends up meeting Kaguya Hime, who's the mythological princess of the moon in Japanese mythology. That was a bit repetitive there. And from that, I just got really obsessed with the moon. I would go outside every night and just stare at the sky. I started to get really obsessed with the stars. And then it wasn't until from that point, I was super obsessed with space. Like I would read any magazines I could get my hands on, Sky and Telescope, astronomy, stuff like that. But then in 1997, when the Pathfinder mission landed on Mars, people might be familiar with from The Martian,
Yeah.
I saw the Sojourner rover that rode along with that lander drive onto the surface of Mars from the animated GIFs that NASA released, because Pathfinder, the lander, actually took photos of Sojourner driving around. And I just thought it was the coolest thing that we could drive a robot on another planet. And I was 11 at the time, and I was like, I'm going to work on Mars rovers. And it kind of blew my mind that literally 10 years later, I was doing exactly that. I was working on Curiosity.
Oh my goodness, I just got goosebumps that this little 11-year-old girl was like, "Yep, I'm going to work on the next one." And then you did. We'll get to that in a second, but geology. So rocks are not necessarily up in space, but I guess they are because they're planets, right? So what was the switch from astronomy, space to rocks, geology, like that kind of thing?
So astronomy is more focused on things like, say, planetary formation or stars and galaxies, things like that. But if you're looking at a rocky planet like the Earth or Mars or Mercury or Venus, you really want to study geology because you want to understand how the planet itself not necessarily formed, because that would be astronomy, but how did it evolve over time? In the case of Mars, where did all the water go? What happened to the volcanic activity? What are the different features on the surface? Tell us about the history of Mars. And since it is very similar to Earth in a lot of ways, it helps if you understand geology on Earth as sort of your starting point, because from that we know what a volcano looks like, we know what a channel looks like, we know what things that are formed by ice look like. And so when we see those on Mars, we can somewhat confidently say we have an idea of what happened there. But every once in a while we get a curveball. We see some stuff on Mars where we're just like, we have nothing like that on Earth, or we have that on Earth, but it's like orders of magnitude bigger on Mars, and we have no idea why. It's not just the gravity. So it's good. Like you have to understand both planets to really like compare them to each other, and that's where geology comes in.
Is that like Olympus Mons, the massive like volcano-y thing on Mars, which is just bananas huge?
Right. So that's one of them. It's 3 times taller than Mount Everest, and the base is the size of like the entire state of Arizona. So it's way bigger than pretty much any volcano that we have on
Oh
Earth
my
in every
goodness.
way. But there's other stuff on Mars that's weird and big too. Like there's these things called polygons all over the higher latitudes in the northern hemisphere, which we see in places like Canada, when the ground freezes and thaws over the seasons. But they're very small, and the ones on Mars are like kilometers in size, and we're just like, how the heck is this happening? We have no idea.
I swear that was a Pokemon that my sons had a card of, a Polygon. I think it evolved from something. um, so you got all this training, and then how? I don't even want to put words in your mouth. I'd love for you to tell us a story. You started to work on these rovers. Which one did you start with? How did that happen?
So the first rover that I was technically on the team for was Curiosity, but I would say the first rovers that I was involved with were actually Spirit and Opportunity, and that's
Hmm.
because the first mission that I worked on, like straight out of my master's degree, because I took 4 years off essentially between my master's and my PhD working on missions. And I was working on NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, which has a
Oh,
camera on
cool.
board called MARSI, the Mars Color Imager. And that takes a full color view of all of Mars every single day.
Hmm.
And I think there are a lot of Mars scientists that don't even know this data set exists. But we use it to monitor the weather. And so my job, basically, one of the things that I did with the various cameras on board was I was a Martian weather girl. So I would forecast the weather on Mars. I'd look for dust storms. If there was anything heading toward the rovers, we would call the rover team and tell them to batten down matches, because you can't drive the rovers out of the way. The storms are obviously much larger than the rovers can drive, since they're going like centimeters a day in some
They're
cases.
kind of pokey.
Um, yeah, they're very, very slow, but you can tell them to do things like close dust covers over sensitive instruments,
Hmm.
or make sure that you're not doing anything that's really power intensive in the case of solar powered rovers like Spirit and Napi, because you don't want the battery to run out. And we did actually have like one very large storm that we were concerned was going to cause not really damage, because the storms on Mars don't have enough oomph behind them to toss antennae around like in the Martian. But the dust can cause a problem with like optics and cameras, and it can pile itself on the solar panels. And so we had one that was heading towards Spirit pretty early on in my tenure working on the camera. And so it was really cool. I got to feel like very important sending an email to Steve Squires, the head of the mission, and being like, there's a dust storm headed towards Spirit. Like, everybody's got to make sure it's going to be okay. And I was like, I'm 20, 21 at the time. So
oh my goodness.
I lost my mind. I was like, this is so amazing.
Did you ever shoot a video in front of a green screen, like a like a weather person? Like, there's a high pressure area coming down, from the north, and looks like it's going to be about minus 72 degrees Celsius today as a high. Like, I don't know.
I wanted to do that so badly, but we didn't have any like outreach budget to do it. So my boss said no to the idea. Oh. But we do have videos. I guess it's not the company I work at anymore, but the company that runs the Marcy camera, they actually put videos on their website of this daily data. So you can go and see like rotating globes of Mars, watch how the weather changes over time, not only for the Marcy camera, but there was another camera on Mars Global Surveyor, which was orbiting Mars from 1996 to 2006, late 2006 when we lost contact. That one also had a camera that took pictures of the whole planet every day to look at weather. And so this is mind-blowing. We have a daily global color image of Mars from almost every single day from about March of 1997 through November of 2006. That is an incredible data set to have for another planet.
Oh my goodness. If you're just tuning in to the space right now, my name is Jason Zakowski. I am the dog dad of Bunsen and Beaker, and our amazing guest is Dr. Tanya Harrison, who's a professional Martian who now works with Planet Labs. And we're just chatting about when you were in your 20s, warning a rover team about impending storms, which is just wild. From that, you moved on to rovers, or were you back at school for a bit?
So after Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, then I was working on Curiosity.
Curiosity, wow.
So I was on the teams for the mast cameras, which are the color eyes of the rover, the Mars hand lens imager, which is like the camera at the end of the arm that is mostly designed to take close-up pictures of rocks, but it's also the one that's taken the really cool selfies of the rover on Mars. And the Mars descent imager, which is mounted on the belly of Curiosity and took a sequence of images as the rover was landing. So I'm sure a lot of people listening probably saw the Perseverance landing video, which is like HD amazing, but it's not actually the first one. The first one we got was with Curiosity, a little lower def, but still very, very cool.
They both used the sky crane, right? They both had that, like the thing lowered them down to the surface of the planet.
Right. And with Curiosity, since we could only see the view from the belly of the rover, you could see things like the wheels descend and the dust that was being kicked up by the retro rockets. But Perseverance, man, the fact that you could like look up at the sky crane while also looking down at the rover and under the rover, like every camera angle you could imagine, like it's just mind-blowing to see this in action, because we were panicking. Like the scientists working on Curiosity, when they told us that they were going to use a sky crane system, none of us thought it was going to work. It was crazy. We'd only ever landed stuff on Mars in like giant airbags where the two it bounces around.
Yeah, Spirit and Opportunity came down in a giant bouncy ball, basically.
Yeah, and so did Pathfinder, so did Viking.
Oh my goodness.
It was the standard thing for landing on Mars. And then they came in and showed us this crazy sky crane system, and we're like, what are you guys on? Like, this is never going to work. It's going to crash. We're all going to lose our jobs. It's going to be the end of the Mars exploration program, because this thing was like $2.5 billion. So literally landing day was so tense, because we just did not think this thing was going to work. And when it did, it was like, holy cow, like props to all of the insanely genius people at JPL that can build stuff like this because they are magicians.
Did somebody ever come by and try and show you what they mean, like with coffee cups and like tinfoil and like, dental floss? They're like, okay, the coffee cup is the thing, and then it's gonna dental floss down the paperclip, and then we're gonna drop it on the surface. Like, and you're like, what are you talking about? That is what?
So sort of, yeah. Adam Stelzner, who was like one of the lead engineers on the Sky Crane, he gave us a talk about how it worked. And I think it actually gave us, like, it kind of put us at ease because he explained like all the different factors that were coming into play, like the wind and velocity and all this other stuff. And it's like, oh, okay, you guys put a lot of effort. Like, you put a lot of thought into this. Not that we thought that they hadn't, obviously, but it was nice to like see exactly how it was going to work. But we still were like, this is really risky, guys.
And was the arm on Curiosity the first one to take selfies? Like, was that the original #NoFilter for the NASA program of its robots?
Technically, yes. We had some pictures where you can like make sort of a projection looking down at the deck of some of the previous rovers, but it's not quite the same. This is the first one where you actually get this expansive view of the rover sitting in the middle of the landscape on Mars because the arm is so long and the focus on the camera is adjustable, which isn't really something that we had on cameras before. You usually want to minimize the amount of parts because if something can move, it has a chance to break. So if you have a camera that's fixed focus, it's less complex. But on Curiosity and Perseverance, there are multiple camera systems on there that are able to change the focus. So we can not only focus close up, for example, but we can also focus, for the photographers in the room, focus at infinity. So you can take landscape pictures or those incredible selfies.
Oh my goodness. And you were, like, just to put this in perspective, you were one of the people that saw those pictures, like part of the team that literally nobody else on Earth saw except for you. Your team saw those first. Like, you were the first human beings to see these pictures of stuff nobody in the existence of humanity has ever seen before.
Right. And
like,
that
did that, I'm just like, nobody can see because it's audio. I'm like pulling my hair. Like, was that a profound moment every day? Like, I'm just like, wow.
Absolutely.
Oh my goodness.
The novelty of that never wore off. Like, any day that like I was in charge of cameras, I would almost want to dance my way to work because you never knew what you were going to see. Like, maybe today's going to be the picture that changes our entire understanding of Mars. And generally that wasn't the case. It's like, oh, rocks, more rocks, stuff like that. But when you got an image that was just mind blowing, or like something where you're like, wow, this is really important. We need to investigate the heck out of this. Like, that, for me at least, is like such an adrenaline rush. And like you said, knowing that, like, a lot of my job was either commanding the cameras to take pictures and or looking at the pictures when we got them back from either the rovers or the orbiters, and like from the standpoint of an engineer saying, is the camera functioning properly? And then from the standpoint of a geologist, is there something cool or important in this image that tells us something about Mars?
Oh.
And looking at that and like knowing that in most cases you're the first human, like literally you know that you are the first human to ever see that picture, that piece of Mars at that time and that resolution and like all that stuff. It's so incredible. And the number of people that get that chance is so small. Like, there are a lot of people that are out there working for NASA or universities doing research with this data, but they're generally not the ones that are like, basically hitting the shutter button and picking what that camera takes pictures of. And I feel so incredibly lucky to have been one of the few people that has gotten the opportunity to do that. Like, it was literally my dream. And yeah, I loved every single day.
Wow. I just got goosebumps all over my body. You told a bit of this story on the podcast, and man, is so powerful. Like, we live in the middle of, we live in rural Alberta, Canada, right? So like, I can walk around and say, oh, I don't think anybody's ever seen this before. I'm pretty sure they have, right? Somebody before me, maybe not me, but hundreds of years ago, maybe somebody saw that clump of dirt. And as a geologist, right, you know, if it was me controlling the camera, I'm like, I don't know, that looks good. Whereas you're like, that rock kind of looks interesting, and you're a bit like a photographer, like smile with your eyes, and then you can take your take a picture of it, right? So you're a geologist that knows what's important. I just put two and two together. I'm a little dense, just like rocks there. So yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things you mentioned on the podcast was, as the two other rovers that you were not necessarily totally part of, but with a bit, Spirit of Opportunity, they one of them powered down, and that was a really profound moment for the teams, I'd imagine, because these little rovers had your hopes and your dreams, and you had worked on them for years, and they have personalities, and they got little googly eyes. Was it sad when the rovers stopped checking in, or at least I think one stopped checking in before the other one?
Right. I honestly don't remember what happened with Spirit. It was Spirit we lost contact with in the time that I had gone back to school for my PhD.
Okay.
But we lost contact with Opportunity while I was working on the mission. So it's kind of funny. I started working like officially as a team member on Curiosity, a newer rover, before I worked on Opportunity, the older rover. So I came into the Opportunity mission like 12 or 13 years in, working on the PanCam cameras. So like the OPI version of MathCam, the color eyes of the rover.
Mm-hmm.
And I was actually on shift for PanCam as what's called a payload downlink lead, which is the person that looks at the pictures when they come back from the rover and make sure, again, the camera's functioning, but also did the rover do everything we told it to, because Opportunity kind of aged the same way that humans do. It was having what we called amnesia events. Its memory, like its flash memory, was failing, and so every once in a while we would send a command, and the rover we told it to, we'd have to like tell it again the next day. Um, and the very last week that we ever had contact with Oppie, I was on shift and we were taking pictures of the sun, which normally you should not point your camera at the sun, but we
No.
do it on Mars. We do it on Mars to see how dusty the atmosphere is. It's a measurement called tau, which is the atmospheric opacity. So how much light is making it through the dust in the atmosphere to your solar panels to keep the battery charged up.
Mm-hmm.
And sorry, we had seen this very large regional dust storm brewing. It was the time of year that it could turn into a global storm, very similar to things like tornado season in the US or hurricane season in the Atlantic.
Mm-hmm.
Global dust storms on Mars happen at a specific time of year, but we can't predict necessarily if they're going to happen or the size. Again, kind of like hurricanes. But we saw this one brewing. It was looking pretty bad, so we're monitoring the sun. And I think it was like Wednesday of that week, we took a picture. We could still see the sun. And then like the next day, we took a picture, and it just looked like snow on a TV screen. And there were all these frantic messages going back and forth saying, did the camera screw up? Is the dust cover closed? Like, is it not pointed in the right direction? What's going on? And I had to reply and say, no, we're pointed at the sun. We just can't see it because the atmosphere was so dusty.
Wow.
And we lost contact the next day. And we tried to regain contact for, like 8 months after that. Before they finally called off attempts and said, yeah, we've lost the rover. And a bunch of us went to JPL for essentially the decommissioning. We did 3 final pings to see if we could wake up Oppie. And everybody's like, oh, wouldn't it be just so poetic if the last one, like Oppie sent something back and it's all going to be good. Knowing that probably was not going to happen. And when it didn't, everybody's kind of in tears and crying and hugging, and it was very emotional. And then we all kind of walked out of the mission control area of JPL, and people are looking around like, what do we do now? Like you said, there were people that spent their entire career on that mission because it operated for almost 15 years. It was under construction for years before that.
Yeah.
There were people that like met each other and got married on the mission, like children during the mission, like. There's so much tied up in it when you're on something that operates for that long, and it was just suddenly gone, and you're like, oh man, what's next? What's the next thing? What do you do from here?
But the data that those missions provided must be just enormous, though. Weren't they only supposed to work for a short period of time? Like, I swear I read, but this is kind of a NASA thing. It's going to only work for 6 months, but they know it's it's going to work for way longer.
Yeah, so Spirit and Oppie were designed to last 90 Martian days, which we call a sol, so 90 sols.
Right.
And, Spirit lasted for about 10 years and Opportunity lasted for almost 15. So that tells you like a huge testament again to the engineers at JPL to build something that can last that long.
Mm-hmm.
But we also got really lucky with some stuff that we didn't expect on Mars. Mostly dust devils cleaning off the solar panels. They came to that 90 sol mark by doing some calculations saying that's how long it'll take before enough dust collects on the solar panels that the batteries won't stay charged anymore. And they had seen with Sojourner, it looked like some dust devils might be coming by and cleaning off the panels based on just some of the data that they had. And this happened basically every year for Spirit and Opportunity. Like there's dust storm season, there's also dust devil season. They'd come by, sweep the panels so they looked almost brand new. It was absolutely incredible. So we got really, really lucky there.
That is profound. Wow. If you're just joining us, this is Spaces Unleashed, and our guest tonight is Dr. Tanya Harrison, worked on Martian rovers. Is a geologist. Doc, can we transition to where you are now? Because you're no longer with NASA. You're with this new organization called Planet. Let me get this right. Planet Labs. Is that did I say that right? Planet or just Planet Labs?
It's both. We used to be Planet Labs, and now, but they both work.
So you are a director of some sort, and I didn't want to get your title wrong. What is Planet? What do you do there?
So Planet is an Earth observation satellite imagery company. So we build tiny CubeSats that are about the size of like a corgi, and we have about 200 of them in orbit that basically orbit in a single plane, essentially, and they image the entire landmass of the Earth every single day at pretty high resolution, 3 to 5 meter in 4 to 8 spectral bands, depending on which of the generations of satellites they're looking. And this is something that really called to me when I learned about Planet, because it obviously is very similar to what we were doing on Mars with the Marcy camera, imaging all of Mars every day. Mm-hmm. For Mars, we were doing it not only to look at the weather, that was the main reason, but we also did it to look for surface changes. So when you have things like these regional and global dust storms, what we call albedo patterns on the surface will change. So those dark and light patterns of the red on the surface will change. The polar caps change over seasons, things like that. So when I heard that there was a company trying to visualize change on Earth by imaging it every day, I was like, this sounds super cool. Let me check this out. But trying to, I had to figure out how to convince an Earth observing company how to hire somebody whose entire career was based on Earth. So that required some creativity on my part.
Okay.
But I'm the director of strategic science initiatives, which is a mouthful, but basically I work as an interface between the research community globally. So scientists that are using our data at universities and government agencies like NASA and stuff like that. And then the folks at Planet. So the sales team, product team, spacecraft people, like all of that kind of stuff. And so it's really fun because you get to act as a translator, and you also just get to see all of the amazing stuff that people are doing with this data. And like as a geologist, like my specific area of expertise is landslides and glaciers. And so when I hear about people doing stuff that involves, say, human geography or anything with the oceans, because I never did ocean stuff, obviously not applicable to Mars.
It's a little dry on Mars, I hear.
Yeah, just a little bit. Or like wildlife, we've got a guy that's trying to, protect walruses using our data, which is so cool. I'm like, man, the Earth is amazing. Like Mars is cool, but Earth's pretty cool too.
Earth does have bacon. I think we rated the planets as Bunsen and Beaker, and Earth definitely came out on top.
Just because of the bacon.
Yeah. Yes. So with all of this data, is no pun intended, or maybe pun intended, is the sky's the limit because of the imaging of the Earth? It's used for anything that you need Earth imaging for, I guess.
Yeah, it's basically anything you can think of, any type of research, any type of application. There's probably something from Earth observation data, like imagery or radar data or microwave data, anything you can get from satellites in orbit that could be applicable to what you're doing. We see a lot of people using it for agriculture, for example.
Oh
It's
yeah.
really great to monitor health of crops. It's been vital in the response of humanitarian things like what's going on in Ukraine right now, monitoring situations in other places like Syria
Hmm.
and Myanmar. And that's probably the most striking for me, coming from a planet where there are no humans, to seeing the kind of things that humans are capable of doing to each other that is like so horrible you can see it from space. Like
Hmm.
that literally brought me to tears when I first started seeing some of this imagery, because you know what's happening on the ground, you can see it on the news and things like that, and then you're also watching it from space. So connecting those two things can be like very, it's extremely emotional in a way that I didn't really expect when I started. But it's amazing to know that you're taking data that can help in situations where it's hopefully benefiting people, and like helping to save lives on the ground.
Hmm. Yeah, I'd imagine it's such a I'm going to say that wrong, juxtaposition. You're like, oh, it's the ocean, beautiful, glaciers, and then horrible things humans are doing to each other in the next photo, kind of thing from space.
Yeah.
How, like, if I go stand out in my field, Doc, and I wave, can these satellites see me? Like, I live in the middle of nowhere. Like, I could go stand out in the field and I'll be the only living thing for, like, could they see me waving?
So probably not. At least the
Okay.
satellites that we have that image the world every day, definitely not high enough resolution to see people.
Okay.
If you talk about like government spy satellites, I don't know what they can see, but the stuff that we operate, we do have other satellites that are about dishwasher size called SkySats. Those can take 50 centimeter resolution images, but even that is only like, you could see cars, you could see airplanes, you could see
Hmm.
groups of people. But you can't say like, oh, that's a Toyota Corolla, that's Dave over there, like stuff like that. That's much higher. You would need much higher resolution data than any commercial satellite imaging companies are actually like allowed to take. There's rules from the government about like what the maximum resolution is you can shoot from space if you're not a government satellite.
Ah, right. If you're not like employed by the Men in Black kind of division of everybody's government. I don't know what the
Yeah.
Canadian version of Men in Black would be.
Oh, that's a good question.
I don't know. Like, would they just be extremely polite and, less abrasive about removing your memory? Something. I don't know, What kind of
I feel
aliens
like
would be in the Canadian, like moose that could talk? Beavers that are like crunching numbers and stuff like that. I'd be curious. There should be a Canadian Men in Black spinoff, I think.
we need to reach out. Do you know Brittlestar?
Yeah, I know Brittle Star. I love that guy.
Oh my gosh, he reached out to me at one point and was like, "We need to do some kind of space collaboration." I was like, "Oh my god, yes!" I feel like I'm talking to like massive Canadian celebrity here.
Yeah.
Like, we should pitch this idea to him. Sorry
Stuart.
for all the non-Canadians that have no idea who Brittlestar is,
No,
but you should
people
look
might
him up.
know. He was on Spaces, actually, Doc. He was on this show.
Oh,
Yeah, he was
oh my
in the
god,
summer. Yeah, Stuart. He's an awesome guy.
that's amazing!
Yeah,
Oh
he's
man, I'm so
hilarious.
bummed I missed it.
Yeah, he's very, very funny. I got us completely off topic. What were we talking about? Oh, right, imaging things from space. I had another joke lined up and I screwed it up because I went off topic. Dang it, it was so good. Anyways, so that's Planet/Planet Labs, the Planet Labs formerly known as Planet or something like that. Um, do you see yourself there for a while? Like, is this like you're enjoying it? Like, is that a tough question to ask you?
No, I absolutely love it. And
Okay.
I think it's so unexpected because it's not Mars, and when I started at Planet, there were multiple people that asked me, they're like, how did we steal you away from Mars to come here? And I said, well, you guys seemed really cool. And that was the main thing, honestly. Like when I was still working on Opportunity, I was working at Arizona State University. I co-taught a class called Commercial Opportunities in Space. And we would bring in people from different space companies to talk about their company and their career path. And Planet was like the first company that spoke in the class. And I was like, holy cow, these people sound incredible. I just need to like, network with as many of them as possible and be like, I'm really cool. You should hire me.
They didn't even try to bribe you with food. Like if I showed up somewhere and they're like butter tarts and, I'd be like, oh, okay, man, this place is nice. I'm switching teams.
Oh, man. ASU did bribe me with tacos. That was pretty good when they were trying to get me to leave Canada. They're like, hey, there are tacos here. I was like, sold. Where's my contract?
I love it. I have 2 more questions. And then for the folks that are in the audience, we do have a question and answer segment. Doc, how much time do you have? Do you want me to keep it tight to the hour? Because
I can run over if you want.
You can run over a little bit. Okay, thank you. I won't keep you too long, but I do have 2 more questions. Okay, the first one is non-Earth, non-Mars related space stuff. What are you most excited about? What are the things that NASA's working on, or even private industry, that's not related necessarily to Earth or Mars?
Oh man, I'm super excited about the Europa Clipper mission because
the Europa Clipper. Wait, I
want to know what's going on in that ocean.
Me too. Yeah, go Europa. Yes. There we go. Go Europa. Now, can you explain that to people? What is the Europa Clipper going to do? Like, it's the ice moon of Jupiter.
Yeah, so this is going to be the first mission to like be dedicated to visiting one of Jupiter's moons, and Europa has this thick icy shell over a warm ocean. And so
cool.
The hypothesis is that, you got water, that's a really good combo for life on Earth, at least. So maybe there's some kind of life that's managed to, arise and thrive in this ocean in Europa. Can't actually visit the ocean with Europa Clipper. The ice shell is like, oh gosh, I forget, 25 kilometers
so
thick or
thick.
something like that. Yeah, it's gonna be a while before we actually get to the ocean. I hope in my lifetime we do, like either that or the ocean South Pole of Enceladus. Like I want us to go in there, turn on a camera, and we see like space whales or like krill swimming around or something like that. I think the chances of finding that are much higher than the chances of finding life on Mars that's alive today.
Right, because it's just so dry. There's not enough water on Mars.
Yeah. And this is honestly kind of the nice thing about not officially being on any of the Mars missions anymore, is that I'm really honest about some of the feelings that I have about like life.
Gotcha. Yep. Well, I think there was a pretty famous movie about drillers being sent to space. So maybe we need to get Bruce Willis and his oil crew and send them to Europa. That worked out pretty good.
There you go.
My last question is to tie it back to the Bunsen and Beaker account. Is we always ask our guests to share a pet story from their life. I know it's kind of a hard right, but since we're talking about life, do you have a pet story you could share with us?
Sadly, I don't own any pets right now. My travel schedule for work and stuff makes it really hard to own a pet. But I've had like cats and or dogs for most of my life, like growing up and when I was a little bit younger. Let's see. I guess I'm constantly amazed by how intelligent dogs. And I used to have this dog named Gus that was an Australian cattle dog, and he was so smart he could like tell the difference between certain toys. And so if you asked him to bring you the red ball versus the blue ball versus the rope versus a frisbee or something like that, and it was really adorable because if you asked him to find a specific toy, like if you said bring me your red ball and he couldn't find it, you would see this like panicked moment on his face, like oh my gosh, I'm gonna get in trouble, I don't know where this is. And so he would pick the closest thing to what you asked for. So if you asked for the red ball and he couldn't find it, he'd bring you blue ball, or like if you asked for the rope and he couldn't find a rope, he would bring you like cloth instead. And it just amazed me that he had like that level of intelligence to be like, this is kind of like the thing you asked me for. Am I still a good boy? Like, is this good enough? And it was always so cute. I felt bad when he would get stressed out because he couldn't find the thing that you asked him for.
Yeah, that's adorable. That is so adorable. Doc, just before we open up the floor to questions, I just want to thank you for coming back to talk to us. You are such a great storyteller, and we're just so honored to have you chatting with us tonight. So thank you so much. Yeah. It's a real treat to have somebody with your passion for space and geology in our space. Haha. A little bit of a pun there. Hey everybody, thanks for listening to our show week after week. If you want to know how to support the Science Podcast, here are a couple ways. It's always going to be free to download, so you'll never have to worry about paying for it. But, things do cost money running a podcast, and here are a couple ways you could help us out. One is join our Patreon page. It's amazing. It's growing. It's almost like an extended family. There's multiple tiers of support, and we have lots of fun perks for being part of our Patreon page. The other way you could support us is giving us an awesome review on Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts, anywhere you can rate our podcast. Give us a great review. The third way you could support the show is checking out the BunsenBurnerBMD.com website. We have awesome merch there. We worked really hard finding quality merchandise that's comfortable with vibrant colors. And you'll find in limited quantities over the next couple months, maybe even less, the 2022 Bunsen and Beaker calendar. So 3 ways to support us: the Patreon page, 2, give us a great review, 3, head over to our merch shop and see if there's anything there you'd like. Thanks, everybody. So it's now time, if you would like to ask a question. To a couple ground rules. If you're going to ask your question, I do double check who you are and I peruse your account to make sure you're not a troll. And if I don't recognize you, you may not get up to the stage, and that's just to keep our space safe and to keep our space wholesome. You can probably, Doc, are you okay answering questions in general about Mars and then maybe the Earth geology? Is that is that good there?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, perfect. So if you would like to request the mic to ask our guest a question, go ahead. Okay, so we've got Indra and then Dr. M. And it takes a second for them to connect, right? Like there's a little bit of a lag. Okay, so we've got Indra. Go ahead.
Oh, I love that. Thank you for holding this space as always. I have just been blown away and I've been so fascinated. In fact, Dr. Tanya, I've been creating these visuals in my head about what you've been describing. And I would really love to know, out of all the planets, if you had the opportunity, which one would you pick? And I'd love to know why, if you could physically visit them.
Ooh.
Oh man, that's a tough one. I feel like I'm required. I feel like I'm required to stay Mars because I really want to, go. And I think as soon as you step foot on the surface and you're able to look around and pick up rocks and just hold them in your hand, you would completely change your understanding of the planet compared to what we can do with the rover. But I think from like a childhood fascination standpoint, I really want to go to Saturn and just like cruise through the rings, because I think that'd be super cool. Maybe it wouldn't be as cool as it seems like it would be in my head, but I don't know if anybody ever played the Magic Lost in the Solar System computer game, but you would like jump through the little bits of the ring of Saturn as one of the characters in the challenge levels, and from that I always wanted to go like out in Saturn's rings, so I might pick that instead of Mars.
That's so cool. That would be my pick as well. If it was possible, Saturn just seems really amazing. So thank you so much. It's been a wonderful time just listening to all the adventures that you've had, and I look forward to hearing the rest of the questions. Thank you so much, you guys, for having me on.
Oh, thanks, Indra.
All right. Great question, Indra. Saturn, just flying through those rings, hey? Do you think it would hurt, Doctor? Like if you got hit, like because they're made of ice, right? Do you think you'd feel it, or it'd be like mist? I don't know.
You probably feel it because they're traveling really fast. Like you probably don't want to get hit by it.
Oh, it'd be a bad time. Okay, I got you. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Over to Dr. M.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me here. Dr. Harrison, you're just so cool. I like supremely cool. I feel like there is all kinds of kids who want to be you when they grow up in terms of what you do.
I want to be Dr. Harrison when I grow up.
I want to be Dr. Harrison too when I grow up, for sure. I am wondering, Dr. Harrison, is what you have been up to, like what you're up to currently and what you have been doing past few years, is this something that you've always wanted to do, or is it something that you kind of fell into, maybe by chance or by luck? Slash, what did you want to be, or as a younger person, or like a teenager, or even a child? What did you want to be back then when you grew up?
So I've always wanted to do something involving space. I think when I was really young, I wanted to be an astronaut, obviously. When I was a teenager, it shifted more specifically to like wanting to work on Mars rovers, but I also really I saw Katie Coleman was here earlier. It's too bad she's not here anymore because my other goal was I really wanted to be a pilot of the space shuttle. And so I wanted to join the Air because you can't be a pilot of the space shuttle unless you were in the Air Force. The space shuttle retired before I graduated, so I'm really glad I didn't my career on wanting to fly the space shuttle. I also couldn't join the Air Force because I'm too short, so that path wouldn't have worked out anyway. So going down the Mars stuff is kind of what I always wanted to do ever since I was like 11 years old. But the Earth stuff that I do now, that I kind of fell into. I thought I was going to keep working in mission ops for Mars missions my whole life. I was going to work my way up the chain. I really wanted to what's called the principal investigator of a mission. So like you have a mission, like leading it yourself with the team and everything. And then the stuff with Planet just kind of happened. And I'm excited that it did. It's such a shift in my career path that I did not expect, but I absolutely love what I do, even though it's so different from what I was doing before and so different from what I spent like literally 13 years of my life working on and cultivating. It's that feels a little strange to be like, okay, bye Mars. I know I invested a lot of time and energy on you, but I'm going to do this other thing. And who knows, maybe someday I will go back. And I still do some Mars stuff here and there, like co-advising some students and, try to keep my toe in the water where I can. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens.
That's amazing. Thank you for answering my question. May I have a follow-up question? It's a quick one. I am wondering, what advice would you have for other younger kids who want to get into the kind of amazing high-level things that you do in terms of what should they do if they want to do the kinds of things that you do? I imagine that what you have gotten to do is not the easiest thing to get into in terms of opportunity, I suppose.
So the number one piece of advice that I tend to give students is that regardless of how old they are, is to be proactive. Like when I knew that this is what I wanted to do, I actively started seeking out people and opportunities and figuring out like, okay, where can I, as a teenager, I'm like, where can I maybe job shadow someone? Because I happen to live in an area where there were space cities. And so I connected with people that let me follow them to work for a day. I went lucky, the university near where I lived had a really great astronomy program. And so I started trying to figure out like how I could connect with professors there, even when I was like 13, 14 years old, to figure out the things that they were working. Literally just finding people and asking questions and being like, hey, is there anything I can do? And even getting the job, my first job working in mission operations, that was literally from at the end of my master's. I was like, I didn't want to continue on for a PhD at that point for many reasons that I've talked about on Twitter. You're welcome to tweet me about it and I'll talk about it again. But I started just sending out emails to a bunch of people whose papers I had read during the course of my research for my master's degree, saying, hey, do you need a data processing person? Like, I'm really good at GIS. Like, are you looking for someone? And one of those people that I cold emailed was the one that referred me to the job at the company that was building the cameras. And so I applied for that job. And then I annoyed the heck out of them, I'm pretty sure, with how incessantly I was like, hey, like, if you want to hire me, my stuff is still packed in my car from like moving from grad school. I could be in San Diego in a week. Just let me know, like, I'll be there. And I told them this every week for like 4 months while they went through this really long hiring process. So like, I think it's just so important to like find opportunities, be ready to chase them when they come up. And like try to make those things happen. Because if you just sit back and wait, like generally that stuff isn't going to happen too. But also you being proactive, let other people out there know what you want to do. And so if they see an opportunity come up that ties to what you're interested in, they'll think of you. They'll be like, oh, hey, I know a person that would be really great for this thing. So you might get referred for a job or referred for a research opportunity or a scholarship or, you know, any of that kind of stuff. It really opens a lot if you just really put yourself out there.
Thank you, Dr. Harrison. I really appreciate it. And thank you for sharing your story with us today.
Thanks, Dr. M. Great question. Doc, I got a little song for you that relates to your story about Saturn.
Seatbelts, everyone! Please let this be a normal field trip. With a friend? No way!
Cruising on down Main Street, you're relaxed and feeling good.
You got it? Did it come through?
Oh, yeah. It came through that time. That's a throwback.
All right. Hey, it's Danielle. Danielle, hey, you got a question for the doc? Over to you.
Yeah, hey, how's it going?
Good. It's so good to see you in the space, and it's so good to hear your voice again.
Yeah, I'm glad to have caught it. Usually with the time difference and me coming home from work, I can't catch it. So I'm glad I was able to get on this time.
Yay.
Yeah, listening to all of the stories about the shuttles and the rovers and Mars, it was incredible. And my imagination is just going wild. But my one question was about something you mentioned, the dust devils that would come and clean off your solar panels to keep the rovers going. My imagination is going absolutely nuts. What is a dust devil?
So they kind of look like tiny tornadoes, but instead of like forming from the clouds down to the ground, it forms when you have a temperature difference between basically the ground and the air close to the ground and the air slightly higher. So it ends up like picking up dust off the surface, and then they travel in these little whirlwinds. There's actually, if you Google like Mars devils, there's actually like animations of the pictures that the rovers have taken where you can see the dust devils going by them. It's really, really cool. We get them on Earth in places like Arizona, like the desert Southwest. You might see them like, around the highway sometimes or being across old farms. But they're not as nearly as they are on Mars. You see them all over the place there.
Okay, so that's really convenient then. So a dust storm will come and settle the dust on there, and then it's kind of the same idea with the pressure system, but a dust devil comes behind and cleans it off. That worked out nicely.
Yeah, again, like I said, totally unexpected. Like we had no idea that happened, and they've literally been lifesavers for these missions, keeping them operational for so long. The InSight mission right now is covered in dust, and they've been hoping that some dust devils would come by and clean off the solar panels, but they haven't gotten very lucky. So that mission might not last too much longer because they've got so much dust on the panels. But you never know. We might get that savior dust devil that comes by and cleans it off at the last minute. One can hope.
One can hope. And well, thank you for this, because this was an amazing talk.
Oh, thanks so much.
Thanks for coming, Danielle. Danielle was a guest on the Science Podcast, I think in season 3. Was it, Danielle? It was about a year ago, 8 months ago, something like that.
Yeah, it was about a year ago before I started my job again.
That's right. And I learned so much about NFL from you. We talked about football for like a half an hour because I knew nothing.
Yeah, do your students still say you look like Aaron Rodgers?
They still say I look like Aaron Rodgers, yes, which has not been good during the pandemic, I'll tell you that.
Oh, yeah.
It's a joke. Not some of my students, many of my students think I look like the Green Bay Packers quarterback, Aaron Rodgers, like off-brand Aaron Rodgers, I guess. So that's the joke that's the joke from the podcast with Danielle. Are there any other?
It's because you do, Jason. You do look like Aaron.
Oh my goodness.
You do. You're a doppelganger.
Well, I wish I made Aaron Rodgers money. I'll tell you that. Are there any other folks in the audience who'd like to ask Dr. Harrison a question? If not, I have one it's kind of a fun one. And so you mentioned you watch Star Trek Voyager. Are you a fan of science fiction, or just that one science fiction thing?
Oh no, many more things than Star Trek.
So okay, I'm happy you said that, because my follow-up question is, what is your favorite science fiction to date, like TV show or movie?
Oh, that's a hard one. I feel like it changes over time, and I'm always torn between, do I go with my OG favorite, the thing that's been with me the longest, or do I pick something, I don't know, newer and fancier that's come along? I would say the thing that stood the test of time for me for a big chunk of my life has been Star Trek Deep Space Nine, actually. So even though I got obsessed with Star Trek through Voyager, DS9 has been just the love of my life. I identified with so many of the characters. I loved how you had these unabashedly badass female characters like Kira, who just took no crap from anyone, and then you had Jadzia Dax, who was this cool scientist. I was like, wow. I didn't realize until I was older. I was like, oh wow, it's so cool that she was a woman and a scientist, which you didn't see it on TV a lot of the point. But I don't know. When I say newer stuff, the next thing that came to my mind was Battlestar Galactica, and then I'm like, Tanya, that came out in 2004. That's not recent anymore.
That was a plot line that was Dwight Schrute's favorite show on The Office, which has been off TV for a while.
And I feel so out of the loop. I'm like, what is recent sci-fi?
No, you don't have to pick something new. You don't have to pick something new. It's all good.
I think my heart is always going to be Deep Space Nine. So I think I gotta go with that.
My heart, it's still science fiction, but my heart is with Firefly, and there was only one season of that.
Yeah.
So, and that's old.
Yeah, that's a solid choice right there.
There you go. Well, I don't think anybody else has any other questions, unless some of our speakers still up do. I'll give them one more chance. Chris, I guess if you have a question. We got Indra, Danielle, and Dr. M. If there's any more questions, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to let you know I cried the day that Oppie didn't communicate back anymore. And listening to your story again just brought me back to that day when I was standing with my students and I said, oh my goodness, something terrible has happened. And they were like, what? And they weren't as passionate about it as I was. But so thank you for sharing that story.
Oh, thank you. If anyone wants to hear more about the stories of the end of Opportunity and kind of the mission in general, there's a really good series. Oh, calling it that makes it sound self-serving because I'm in it, but I'm not saying it because there's a series called Secrets of the Solar System on Curiosity Stream, and each episode focuses on a different planet. And the episode on Mars goes through a lot of the previous Mars missions, and then has a really nice touching bit where they interviewed about the end of Opportunity, and they actually took some footage in mission control on the day when we were there. I didn't even notice that they were there. So when this came out, it was a total surprise to me, but I'm kind of happy that someone was there to capture this. So if you have curiosity, that the whole series is worth checking out. Every episode they did for each of them is really thick, and they interviewed some really amazing people that have been in space exploration. Some of the newer people, and then some folks that have been around for decades.
All right. We have time for one more question. I apologize if I say your first name wrong, but your last name is Gonzalez. Go ahead.
I'm used to this. Trust me. It's Jackie.
It's Jackie? Okay. Hi, Jackie.
Yeah, it is. I blame my dad constantly because he decided he was Jack, so he named me Jackie, but without the S, people still think I'm Jacques. So, that's what it is. I'm used to it. Dr. Tanya, I just wanted to say I absolutely love following you on Twitter. I love everything that you put out. And now I love what you're talking about with all the curiosity things. I definitely have to look that up. But now knowing that you're a Trek fan on top of it, I adore you beyond all means. So yes, adore you. You're a rock star.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. That's so sweet.
Thanks for the awesome comment. There's one more that came in through DM. Doc, do you have time to answer a DM question?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Okay. So it's kind of a silly one. It's from Liz. She's teaching class right now, so I guess she's trying to listen too. She's curious as if there were any blooper stories about things that went hilariously wrong dealing with the rovers. Like something that just comes to your mind that was like a big oops or a silly thing that happened.
Oh man.
I guess like there's two people you don't want to hear say oops. One is somebody in charge of like $1 billion space mission, and the other is a surgeon operating on you. So I don't know if that ever would you say oops? I don't know if that ever happened to the mission. If not, that's okay. We'll just move on.
Yeah, there's nothing that immediately comes to mind, but now I have to think on this. If I can think of something, I'll tweet about it for sure. But there's nothing that immediately comes to mind.
Sure. If you tag us, then we'll retweet it if it ever comes to mind.
Okay. There's certainly lots of funny stories that I can think of, but none that are like a blooper necessarily.
Okay. Well, Dr. Harrison, thank you so much for giving up your time tonight for our science chat on Spaces Unleashed. I've just been in awe of listening to you talk. You're like I said, an amazing storyteller, and our lives are so much better and full having just spent this small amount of time with you. So thank you for giving up your time tonight. And I know you're traveling from this conference, so that's also kudos to you for coming. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. You guys are all sweet. I'm glad you all dialed in this evening. And I'll catch you all on Twitter, I guess.
That's right. If you are not following the good doc, click on the profile and then you can follow Dr. Harrison right now. And you have a link tree that links to some of your other stuff. Like you have a book that you co-authored with a couple other folks that's on Amazon too.
Yeah, I've got a book called For All Humankind, which is a collection of stories, true stories of people that watched and listened to the moon landing live as it happened, but none of them are American. So I wanted to see what impact the moon landing had on the rest of the world. And I have another book coming out later, which is about Earth exploration. So that actually just saw on Amazon called Year by Year. Both of these are with my friend and colleague, Dr. Danny Bednar, who works for the Canadian Space Agency and at the University of Western Ontario. So definitely look forward to that coming out, once I finish writing it. So should be good, hopefully. You guys can all tell me, come November if it's good.
Oh, I can't wait. We follow you on Twitter all the time, so we'll see that when we see that tweet, we'll retweet it as well.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much.
Because I'm sure it'll be a big deal when it comes out.
I'm certainly going to make a big deal out of it.
You're going to make a big deal of it.
My first book was about the moon. They're like, why are you writing about the moon? You're like, don't worry. I'll write a Mars book someday. So someday is now November. Keep an eye out on Amazon and your local bookstores.
I love it. We will. One more time, thank you. Thank you for coming to the space and being our expert guest on Spaces Unleashed.
Thanks so much. Thanks, everyone.
As we close out tonight, I just want to thank all of our speakers who came up to ask questions. It's daunting and to be a public speaker on the internet. And special thanks to our audience. We had a huge crew of people listening to Dr. Harrison talk about her area of expertise. And one more time, thank you, Dr. Harrison, for being our expert tonight. Every week on Tuesday at this time, we bring an expert guest to Twitter in our science chat. Next week, we have Dr. Liz Murray, who's a phytoremediation scientist. Power of the sun to clean up the planet. I can't wait to talk to her. Plus, she has giant dogs that we'll get to discuss as well. This weekend on Saturday, we have our wholesome and silly non-science space called Pet Chat. It's at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Come by and listen to the stories about Bunsen and Beaker and share your own pet stories. We also have a game, I think. Hey, Chris, we're going to do another game. Somebody's going to win a prize, I think, on Saturday.
Yep, it's going to be great. It's going to be awesome.
All right. If you subscribe to the Science Podcast, both Dr. Harrison and one of our speakers, Danielle Bush, were guests on the Science Podcast, and you can listen to their full interview without goofy sound effects and me trying to make jokes. Okay, take care, everybody. We're going to close out the space right away here. For science, empathy, and cuteness. Space closing in 3, 2, 1. Thanks again, Doc. You're the best. Best wishes in the future.